everybody. I just thought I'd do this video because over the last month or so I've had some very interesting questions, well, from my perspective, interesting questions asked me, and I thought rather than try and write the answers, I'd do a little video and share all the answers with you all. So the first questions come from a lady called Nicole, and she got in touch, and one of the first things she asked was, did I think I was different as a child? That's a really good question, Nicole. And I suppose the first question is, what is normal? What are you different from? But I think what she was referring to was whether I felt I was into this world of energy and information at that age. Difficult one. I know my circumstance meant that I was very much self-sufficient and often didn't have many friends around. I wasn't a Billy No Mates, I promise. But what it was that I actually went to school in a different borough in London from where I lived. I lived in Brent, which is a borough in northwest London, and I went to school in Harrow. And what it meant was that I just didn't have any friends around the corner or over the valley. Oh, I'm stepping into Welsh land there. We weren't over the valley then, we were in a different street. So there was nobody sort of close by, friend-wise. Plenty of friends there, but it usually meant that a parent had to bring us to and from, so you couldn't just walk around. So it meant that I did have a lot of time on my own, and I was quite happy, and I still am quite happy being with myself, if you like, want to put it like that. I was a typical horse mad child, so that I made games up in the garden, jumping jumps and running races. I did have quite a vivid imagination because I know I wrote a lot of stories, and I remember I won a small national prize for something about cocoa, I think it was. But words were important. I read a lot. So the actual energetic stuff, I could not say that I can remember being connected in any way with it, but my love of horses was massive right from the minute I could speak. That's all I wanted was a horse. And in fact, I do remember, for those of us who are old enough, you might remember a group on Facebook, no, not on Facebook, on the internet, called Friends Reunited, and it was the step before Facebook where everybody who knew each other could get in touch. And I actually got in touch with a lot of my old primary school friends, and I'll never forget sort of the first conversation I had with one of the lads that was in school with me, when I was about 6-7 years old. And the first thing he asked when we reconnected was, are you still as horse mad as you were then? And I thought, oh goodness, I must have been bad. So yeah, I do remember, a vague memory, this, when I must have been 3, 4, 5, I don't know, but it seemed to me that I'd sit up in bed and was I talking to someone? I don't know. Or was I making a story up? But I can definitely remember sitting up in the middle of the night doing something like that. So was I different? It might be. I loved school. Does that make me different? Not sure. Loved learning, always wanted to be at school. And in fact, one of my reports when I was about 7 or 8 actually said, Catherine asks questions that require individual answering. So I was an awkward bugger then, and I haven't changed now. But yeah, so it's always difficult to, when you're in the inside looking out, to make a judgment. It's much easier someone else looking at you going, yeah, you were different. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask some of my friends and find out. So yeah, that was that question. The other question was a really interesting one about the work that I do. And she asked me, do I get tired when I work? And the meaning behind that was that she had been advised when she'd been learning various energetic modalities not to do too much because it can drain you. And I really understand that, because I believe I was told that when I went through Reiki or something, and don't quote me, I can't remember, but I know it was a sort of a known thing. You didn't do too much because it could drain you. What I'd say about the work I do now, Point of Balance, is because it's a completely different way of interacting with the system, it doesn't drain me at all. And I think the reason for that is that, for instance, when I did other energetic modalities, I would scan the person or the horse and I'd look for where there might be a problem. And then out of my own perception, I would then think, well, that needs to change, that energy is wrong, that this should be done or that should be done. So I was doing something. I was finding something, then doing something. And the doing was very much reliant on what my perception was and what my knowledge was. With point of balance, none of that comes into play, because I work from the point that the system I'm working with, be it a person, a horse, a dog, whatever, inherently at energetic level wants to be in balance and does actually know how to get back to balance. But stuff gets in the way, stuff knocks it out of balance. And my job, as I see it, is to, what I call condition the space, make it easier for the system to find the answers it needs to move itself back into balance. So there's no doing by me, there's more being. My intention is that the space around that person, that horse, that dog is conditioned, becomes more ordered, if you like. And I don't need to do anything to do that. It's an intention is enough. It's all about the energy, about electromagnetic frequencies. So I personally don't get drained at all when I do this work. But I remember watching a program that was on Sky 3 or 4 years ago, and I believe it was called The Healer. And it was about a young man, I believe he was Australian, and he discovered he had this gift, ability, whatever you want to call it, that he could work with people and he could lower their pain. So people that maybe had arthritis or muscle problems, I'm trying to think, neuralgia, he would work for them for maybe half an hour, if that, and their pain would be dramatically lowered. He worked for nothing, he didn't ask for any money, and he very often, towards the latter stages when they were filming this, actually had a medical practitioner of some kind. You know, it might be a chiropractor or a nurse or somebody with them who would verify that the person he was working on, if you like, wasn't putting it on, that when he finished the treatment that they had less pain. You know, you could see them, they were walking around going, my God, this is amazing, chucking sticks in the air and goodness knows what, because it was brilliant. So, you know, there was obviously something quite dramatic going on there. And I remember he worked with a young man who had terrible neuralgia, which was so bad that on the pain scale, you know, what's your pain out of 10? Every day he was at 8 or 9. And the guy, the healer, he worked with him. And after that one session, his pain dropped to about a 5 or a 6. And the man was overjoyed. It was such a massive relief for him. However, the healer said, no, I believe we can do better than that. Let me work with you again. And so he did. But he had to put more effort into it the second time to keep that pain level dropping. And it was to the detriment of the healer, because when he'd finished the treatment, he was really exhausted and he had to take a couple of days to recover. And the thing is that you then found out as the story went on that when he began working, he didn't regulate himself, he didn't take care of himself, he went full bore, and he actually took 2 or 3 years to recover, because he absolutely wiped himself out, and he had to be really careful. He had a very careful diet, what he drank and everything, to really keep his system in balance. And I also find it interesting, I think Rupert Isaacson mentioned it on Warwick's podcast with him, how the shamans, gifts are brought which are not only in gratitude for the work that they do with the people, you know, if somebody goes to them, but it's also because very often the shaman or the medicine man or woman may be very tired after the work, and so would not be able to feed themselves, inverted commas, you know, go and gather food or anything. So part of the payment, if you like, is to provide food for the medicine man, the healer, to recover after having done a ceremony. So I'd love to talk to someone about that. I'm really fascinated by that. But for me personally, no, I sit in the frequencies. My intention is just out there, and that's all I need to do. So I'm also very blessed that I believe that when I actually work, some of that rubs out off on me. So nice work if you can get it. A bit of a double whammy, you know. I can sit in it and I'm also helping somebody else, so, or another horse or whatever. So yeah, for me, it doesn't drain me at all. It's everything that goes around organising the sessions that is more tiring than actually doing the sessions. But I mean, it's all part of the big picture and the big work. So yeah, that's that. Then the other questions came from a lovely young lady called Neki, who got in touch with me the day after the podcast went out with Warwick. And she asked some quite deep questions. So the first question she asked me was, if distance healing works, why can we not change the powers that be, the government, the people in charge, and get them to act in a more beneficial way? Let's put it that way. And I'm not going to go into politics or anything like that. But I did see her point that, you know, if I'm saying, right, distance session can help somebody change, why can't we do that? There's no saying it can't. I'll discuss something that an intention experiment that was carried out that may have well had that effect. But for me, the first thing is about changing yourself. So if you feel that you are, you know, your instant reaction is anger or frustration to something, it's maybe change that to begin with. Find out why you're feeling it and see if you can change that to much more peaceful, grateful, happy energy, because what we are is what we give out. So if we live in a life of continual anger and frustration and, you know, snarky comments and not judging people, that's what everybody feels, and so they will respond in kind. But if you can step into an energy of love, and I know on the podcast I spoke with Warwick, you know, love is all the different levels of it. It's not just the sort of physical attraction, I love you. It's about appreciation, about gratitude, about seeing people, about hearing people, about being present. All of the positive things that you can think, for me, are part of love, and that's how you act out of love. So when you do that, if you meet somebody who is maybe having a bad day, but you can stay grounded and present in that feeling, that positive emotion, you have every chance of helping that other person step out of the negative emotion they're in, and they can feel the benefit. And that's how that gets passed on. I love the saying, you know, be the change you want to see in the world. So if you're thinking that the world is too violent and too angry and everyone's arguing with each other, start by being the change yourself. See how much help you can be. And the thing is that it sounds, oh gosh, you know, one person changing their attitude. But if we all did it, there's a much bigger energy out there, and it's a ripple effect. It just goes out and out and out and out. And the fact is, by stepping into the positive energy, you're also helping yourself health-wise, because you have all the beneficial biochemical reactions going on instead of the negative ones. When you're angry and frustrated, there's the negative biochemical reaction goes on. So again, double whammy. You're helping yourself and you're helping the next person, and you're helping the world in general by doing that. So when I mentioned that there has been an experiment where this has actually been carried out, I'm talking about Lynne Mctaggart with her intention experiment. And Lynne, I think, started this in about 2008, 2009, something like that. And what she did was she created a community online, which still exists and is still there, whereby every week, to begin with, for 10 minutes, people would set an intention on, I think they first of all started with people would sort of get in contact and say, my father-in-law was very ill with cancer, and everybody's intention would be for them. And I'm not sure if she's still doing that actually, but that's how it started. But then she wanted to go a step bigger, and she wanted to see if all of these people from all over the world could actually effect change on a political situation. And to do this, she wanted to have, I can never say this word, statistics. So she needed figures of what was happening before the intention experiment was carried out, and then afterwards, so that she could say yes or no, did it work? She didn't know whether it was going to work, and she wasn't trying to make a point. She wanted to do a scientific study. Now, most of the places that she asked, all of the figures were all classified. They were not allowed out. So if she went to a city and said, right, what is the rate of violent crime? Could you give it to me for the past year? We'd like to do this experiment and see if it drops. Nobody would allow her to have those figures. So in the end, the only place she could find figures for was in Sri Lanka. And somebody there had been correlating the number of deaths and injuries in the civil war. The civil war had been going on for 25 years, and it was based in the north of Sri Lanka and involved the Tamil Tigers and the government forces. So somebody had been there, and I can't remember the guy's name, but he'd actually recorded all the data for the past 2 years on how many deaths there'd been every day and how many injuries. So this was ideal. This was the place to work to see if a change could be effected. So I think it was in September 2009, the middle of September 2009, for 7 or 8 days, Lynne set the experiment up, and she kept it quite low key to begin with, because she wasn't quite sure, if everybody got involved or if there might be, some anger against it or whatever. But anyway, people found out, and it ended up there were people, I think, from 65 countries actually were involved in the intention experiment. So the intention was to bring peace to this area. And what they found was quite interesting, is that the violence rate actually seemed to go up as they were doing the experiment. And you'd think, oh, that's very useful. But when you looked at what was actually happening, it was the government forces were, for some reason at that moment, putting more effort in. So there were more small skirmishes, battles going on to gain control, which the government was doing. But obviously the more battles, the more deaths and the more injuries there were. So there was an incline, a rising up of the numbers. But then after, don't quote me, it was a week or two, the numbers dramatically fell. I mean, they went down so much. I think it was a 74% drop in deaths and a 48% drop in injuries, which was not expected. They'd expected, if you correlated the statistics through October, the projection was there would be very little change, but there was a massive change. And in fact, I think agreement was reached not too long after that. Whether the intention experiment actually affected change, don't know, but it's an interesting concept. The other side of it was when she sent a questionnaire out to all of the people who'd taken part in the actual experiment, the feeling was they all felt more love for their fellow human being. And so it could be, some of them reported that something like 48-50%, I think it was, reported feeling more love for all of their family and their co-workers and their friends. But overall, there was a 34% increase in people liking strangers, much more than they did before. So, in answer to Necky's question, yes, something big could be done if enough people got involved. I mean, obviously this is one experiment and it's not a guaranteed outcome, but it looks promising. And if nothing else, the people that were involved with that intention experiment, their change, their heightening of love for other people must have that's a really positive thing to note. So that was, I mean, you can say that that's a way you might be able to do it. But there's interestingly, I've just read, I'm in the process of reading a book called Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who is a Native American lady. She's I think a professor of botany, but she's also very aware of all of her native roots, excuse the pun, and she interweaves. The book is just sublime. But I've just read a part now, and it might be the reason why I'm doing these answers now, doing this video now, because I have been thinking about doing this for 2 or 3 weeks. Well, she told the story of the Mohawk people whose land had been taken from them, and they got together and they purchased 400 acres of land, and it was where they had been before. It was, you know, ancestral land, and some of the old buildings I think were still there, but very dilapidated, and they restored everything. And she tells the tale of how she and some other women were out there planting sweetgrass, which, you know, was the native grass and provided so much to their native people on so many levels. And it was just lovely because she said even in that small patch they were being returned to wholeness. And there you have it, that I think so much of the problem we have at the moment is a disconnect from who we are, from where we come from what we eat, from each other. And so this 400-acre site, which obviously was minuscule compared to their native lands as they were, was a massive way of reconnecting themselves to who they were and where they'd come from. The other thing I wanted to say about the intention experiment, which has just come back to me, is that in the world there is something called the Global Coherence Initiative or project, which is looking at how the energy within the world may change when something happens. And what they found, they have these random number generators situated all over the world, and they are giving out noughts and ones completely randomly. And what they've discovered is that if there is a big emotional event within the world, such as 9/11, such as the tsunami of 2004, such as the death of Lady Diana, there becomes order in these random number generators. So instead of it being a random noughts and ones, there is some kind of order, which shows that the emotion of the people affects the energy, which then affects these random number generators. And when Lynne Mctaggart carried out the intention experiment, they also found, they looked at the random number generators around the world, and they found that in the window of when the intention was actually set out, I think there's like a warm-up period, then they do the intention, and then there's a sort of a cool down, if you like, and it takes about 40 minutes. But I think there's actually 10 minutes when the intention is set really strongly. And they found that in those 10 minutes, as the intention experiment was being carried out, there was an effect on these random number generators, the order, there was a change. And yet again, I think that shows how if we could get enough positive emotion going around the world, we can affect the energy of the world, and that can affect the people within it in a positive way. So again, that's just another side of the intention experiment and the effects that it had. The other question Neki asked me, which is pertinent for all us horsey people out there, she was finding it very difficult to have peace with the fact that there are, let's say, better ways of being with horses now, but a lot of people are still doing the more, I shall say, the more old-fashioned ways. And I'm not judging anyone for it. I was there and have been there and done that. You know, if people haven't had the information, how can they change? But she was finding it quite hard to sort of reconcile that. And again, for me, there's answers to this on several levels. The first is, you could be working in a yard where more traditional methods are used, and you know a different way of being. The choice is yours totally about whether you stay there and carry on working, or whether you take the mindset of, I may not be able to change the world for these horses completely, but maybe when in my interaction with them, I can. And just accept that that's what you're doing. That you're, if you like, you're showing the horses, I am hearing you, you are being heard, we're in a process of change. You know, just come along with us, sort of thing. That's one way, you know, maybe of looking at it. The other way is, again, no judgment on the people. For me, the process of no judgment came quite hard. But the way I look at it now is, if I see someone do something that maybe makes me go, God, don't like that. I have to stop myself and say, well, they're not a bad person. You don't know what their knowledge is. They might not have any more knowledge. That's all they know. But the other fact is that unless I've lived their life or lives, let's go past lives as well, I cannot say I would not react in exactly the same way as them. So if you see someone doing something which you class as horrendous, obviously by the law of the land, something has to be done and they have to be judged. But internally, I can't say, oh, I'm a better person than that one because I'm not going to do that. Because I don't know. What have they been through? What has their past been that's given them the perception and led them down to this path that that's the reaction, that's the action they felt they needed to take? I'm just going to leave that there, okay? So for people who you see maybe working with horses in a way that makes you, again, internally, oh God, it's just a matter of letting it go, for me anyway, because I'm sure many of us have tried to preach the good word and say, unless people are ready to actually step into it, they're not going to. And in fact, actions speak louder than words. So it's a case of, you know, carry on doing your thing to the best of your ability. Again, those words, integrity and authenticity. If you do everything with the best knowledge you've got in the best way possible at that moment, nobody can ask any more. So I would say that about, you know, non-judgment is to accept people as they are. Don't judge them, and do your best again within yourself to step forward in the way that you wish to be the change you want to see in the world. So I hope some of that makes sense. As you can see, it's an absolutely beautiful day here today, so I thought I'd do the video outside and enjoy the sunshine at the same time. I hope to be speaking to you very soon. Thank you very much for watching. If you want to know any more about my work, go to my website please, www.kathyprice.co.uk, and hopefully I will see you soon. Lots of love and bye bye.